determination to address the issues. Beyond what Roland said, we also discussed in our very rich discussion migration, for instance. It is for us in the European Union a key issue, and it means also that we have to address, beyond the economic weight of the problem of migration, the problem of security. Security in the Middle East. We are here in Dubai, in the place where migration is not only natural, but a key resource to build this magnificent city that is Dubai. If you are in Europe, in the EU, the perspective is somewhat different, and we have to address this issue, because otherwise we'll have the difficulties that led to confrontation and maybe war. So you see, all this is interlinked and must be addressed in a coherent way, an ambitious way.
There was a very nice phrase mishandling by the Victorians. So I believe this is the key problem of globalization 3.0. It was mishandled by those who gained the most during the globalization period. So the globalization 4.0 should be about rebalancing and proper handling of the situation by those who are on the top of the list.
You want to ask to that?
Are you turning to me?
Yeah, you can.
Well, just perhaps coming in on migration. I mean, we have a mismatch, don't we, where Europe has an aging society, Africa has young demographics, but the two haven't found a way to marry their needs so that some of Africa's surplus can be absorbed by the needs of Europe. There's also the issue that a lot of the informal migration, leave aside the forcibly displaced, of whom there are many, but most of the informal migration, you look at the faces of those who are on the boats, overwhelmingly the picture is of young, energetic men who want work, right? So I think looking at it from both ends, Africa is really wanting the investment in its economies and its people, which will supply more opportunity at home. But Europe also has labour force needs that should be met by orderly migration. It's how to marry these two sets of needs, I think, that is the big challenge between the two continents. There's an old saying, if my neighbour's poor, I'm poor too. Well, I think we're seeing that those tensions played out because we haven't got migration right.
But you can marry those needs in two ways. You actually can move jobs towards the Africa, or you will either get the people back to Europe. So if you proper handling the situation, there will be no huge migration flows and the problem.
Hilary, Katam, listening to this discussion, no, it's also moving into it is about the social contract. You saw in your own country, United Kingdom, with the Brexit. There are different interpretations why it ended with a majority for leaving the European Union, but I think there is consensus that is related also to the whole notion of inclusiveness and globalization, and I think at the end also migration.
Yes. I mean, I don't want to be the person who's going to explain Brexit because that's, highly contested. But one thing I would say is that my work, I work to build alternative forms of social welfare, and I do that by starting and going to live in communities that are on the margins and working with those communities to build something different. All the communities I work in either don't vote or they voted for Brexit. In the full knowledge that it would bring further chaos, but really not minding because they felt such a sort of antipathy to a system where, in fact, most of the families I work with, for instance, they are in work, but they're paid so little that they're propped up on benefits in order to feed their families. And nobody wants to live like this. And I suppose that's, these stories, which I can tell from living and working in different parts of the world, not just Britain, is why I think it's so important that in this moment we show real leadership. We don't try and fix those systems, whether it's trying to make existing health systems more efficient or provide money to people who are on the outside that doesn't allow them to fully participate, or even with education, just puts 20th century education systems online and says, well, we're modernizing. I think instead we have to think completely differently about what we need to provide in order order that everyone flourishes. And I think we see this in pockets all around the world. We see innovation. We see companies working in different ways to support their workers. We see different social innovations, but they're very marginal. They don't have enough resource, and most importantly, they don't have an architecture around them that can enable them to grow and move from the margin to the mainstream. And I'm hoping that through these meetings and through the next meeting at Davos, we're going to be able to take the first steps in designing that architecture.
Jean-David?
Yes, one word about migration, because in Europe, it is probably the number one issue which explains the rise of populism in a number of our countries, if not all our countries. And it is the result of the deep feeling that the governments have lost control, first of the borders of the European Union, and second, of the movement of people. So I agree with what was said. We need a plan, first to help countries of origin to develop their economy. And that's what the EU has done, and we will continue to do it in the most ambitious way. But second, we need to better control our borders. In Dubai, in the UAE, you control your borders, and that's good. We need to do the same all over the European Union. But then we need also to better integrate those migrants in our societies. We've been in 2015 confronted with a massive wave of migrants. And 2 years, 3 years later, the movement of migrants are 10% of what they were, but the political consequences are still there. And so it shows that it is of strategic importance that together the governments of the European Union better address this key issue.
You know, I was listening both to the migration discussion and what Hillary was saying about the need for a new social contract, and it really goes beyond the countries in which working and middle classes have been dislocated by the effects of globalization. I mean, you think about it more broadly in terms of the welfare, the lives and livelihoods of individuals. We spend a lot of time talking about great power rivalry, about what's happening with Trump, about the relationship between what's happening with Europe and Brexit and what's happening between Russia and China and Russia and the United States. What is often lost in these discussions, even in discussions of climate change, for example, is that it is experienced by individuals in their lives and livelihoods. And if we're talking about creative coalitions involving groups of states and non-state actors and NGOs and the private sector, I think about the example of the Human Security Coalition that Norway and Canada were a part of, and that had an agenda including upholding international humanitarian law and protecting people in those contexts. And the kind of recklessness that is part of this trend towards a lack of self-restraint and a recklessness is put great strain on that. Those are individuals experiencing that. The same thing for journalists.
Hal?
Well, I think it all comes back to the individual citizen and how they're experiencing these global trends. If your job's gone, if you're told that it's going to have to go because your country's got to meet some global agreement or another, you're going to be grumpy, and we're paying quite a heavy price for that, whether it's Brexit or exit of other great countries from agreements. So I think really the message to governments is take charge of your destiny, invest in your people, be scanning the future, see what lies ahead, see what you can do to improve their position, but be a global citizen as well. I was asked a question for the social media team here, is it possible to be a patriot and a global citizen? And I said, of course, because a patriot should want their country to be an engaged global citizen that's contributing. And you just can't foot it as a country if you're trying to go it alone.
Mr. Oreshkin, we have talked now about investing in people, skills, education, health, inclusiveness. All this also costs money. So there is fiscal side to it. We also, and talking about risks, we see that in a report that was launched today by the World Economic Forum, where we had asked 12,000 business leaders around the world, this fiscal monetary situation that we're faced with was one of the top risks in the sense that we are now 3.7% growth this year. That's not bad globally, but we're seeing the economy slowing. And have we been repairing the roof when it has not been raining? And do we have the gunpowder that would be necessary to fight a new recession when we, in many countries, still have 0 interest rates? We're running bigger debt than we did in 2007, and we lack the willingness to collaborate that was there in 2008 when world leaders came together and fought what could have ended into a depression but became the Great Recession. So I'm asking you this question, of course, as the Minister of Economy, but also as a great economist.
But actually what we started with is that globalization resulted in a positive result for the global economy. So it means that the money already here, but we are not using them properly. So if with the current amount of money that is available, we are not able to provide proper human capital development, broad human capital development, it means that we have misallocation of profit sharing process within the structure of economy. So what I'm trying to tell is that new globalization phase should be about rebalancing, how to use the money that we already have to achieve the results that we are not achieving as of now, the results of inclusive growth, the results of inclusive human capital development. So this is the main story. And in terms of repairing the roof, I believe that we should repair the base of growth and not the roof, because the problem is with the base and not what we have on top. So we should look deeper, and we should, and the leaders should come together and think not how to make the same things going forward with the same pace, with the same structure, but how to rather to change the structure of income distribution and spending distribution within the global economy.
So you're really talking about also the Gini coefficient here, Yeah. I think, of course, I'm Roland and Helen, and I'm not objective on this, coming from countries that have quite good results when, at least New Zealand and Norway, when it comes to the Gini coefficient, but are also very competitive economies. If you look at your own country, what are the steps you will do to address this, and without also not leading to lack of competitiveness and growth?
The whole new program that we have in Russia for the next 6 years is aimed at improving human capital and creating opportunities for each Russian citizen when whatever place he lives in or whatever starting position he has. So we are concentrating on this, and for example, one of the national goals for the next 6 years to decrease the poverty rate 2 times. So that's what we're trying to do, and find the solutions for this, and each country should do the same.
So it also boils down to domestic politics here where you have to be willing to take that discussion. You know this from 10 years as Prime Minister, Helen. It's an ongoing challenge, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's tough, and New Zealand went through such a massive and quite quick economic transition, which left a lot of bruises. But eventually, the society comes around to seeing that you just have to keep investing in people. The social wage has to be kept high. We're fortunate in our country. There's very few out-of-pocket expenses for education, for healthcare. There is a social safety net. People can be picked up and moved to new opportunities. But I think the proactive state like that is absolutely needed to shepherd people through the transitions that we're going to keep facing as economies change, technology speeds up. We have to do things differently for the climate change response and so on.
So, Hillary, I think when we're coming to the end here now in this panel, it's also coming very close to what you write about in your book, at least what I've seen of your writings about this social contract. We need to continue to trade, and we need also to continue the globalization, but we need to take much more seriously the legitimacy of the contract that we have today. It has to be, we have to rethink, and we have to also to implement different policies. Do you see any signs of this? And
well, I think it's really important that we're here discussing it, and that this is going to be the agenda for Davos, and it's extremely timely. I think, in the way that Jean-David has been talking about historically, we need leadership. We've been here before. Out of the ruins of the Second World War, we built something amazing, so we know we can do it now. But also, it is about that very big picture that you're talking about and the small picture. I mean, one of the most important things we could invest in is human relationships, the relationships between us that keep us well, that find us new work opportunities and so on. And this would be the kind of building block of the new architecture. Now, we see glimmers of that, but I don't think yet we can hold up any nation and say, we've got there. And that's, I hope, what we're going to build in the months ahead.
Thank you to the panel. I think they did great and deserve great applause. Thank you so much. And I think looking at people here, I think, and this is the best sign, I think people would have liked you to continue the discussion, and that's when you should end. Too many panels end a little bit later. So thank you.
Thank you.
Please stay seated. There will be more adventure coming. So before we begin our final comments, I would like to start with some important thanks. First, special thanks to His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, the Vice President and Prime Minister of the United Emirates. It's a very special and ongoing partnership between the World Economic Forum and the UAE. This year, as I also said at the opening, we have celebrated 10 years of this fruitful and successful collaboration. Also, a special thank to His Excellency Mohammed Abdullah Al Gargawi, the Minister of Cabinet Affairs and the future of the UAE. I always dreamed about that kind of title, Minister of the Future, huh? Thank you for your personal and long-term commitment to ensuring the highest quality engagement and collaboration with the World Economic Forum, and also, Minister, for your pivotal role in making not only this summit, but our overall relationship rise to a new level every year. Thank you for your friendship. And also, thank you to the excellent team from the UAE that has been working so hard on this summit, which has been superbly led by Mr. Ashraf Shahab. Thank you. I would also take the liberty to thank my colleagues at the World Economic Forum, Stefan and his team, Lee and his team, Jeremy, Mirek. If I start now mentioning all this, I will be in trouble. So I would say that I would like us all to give the team of the World Economic Forum that has been working 24/7 during the last days, sitting in the council booths, then running to do other stuff. Also, thank you to my colleagues. And with these thanks, I would like to invite His Excellency to the podium to give his closing comments. And we should now take on, for those that are not fluent in Arabic, should take on your headsets. Excellent.
In English this time.
Will you?
Yes.
Wow, I was now instructed with big letters here, capital letters, to remind people on putting on their headset, but even better. Thank you, Minister.
Good evening. I know it's been a long 2 days for all of you through different sessions. But let me answer your question, basically, about Minister of the Future. It's a title, and a lot of people have been asking me, what do you do really? I think we've been learning from our relation with the World Economic Forum. And we've been learning from the Future Council. And whatever we learn, we go back to the government and we're trying to implement it. My job is really, it's very simple, is to get the nation ready for the future and to get the people of United Arab Emirates ready for the future. It's very simple, but it's very complex also. We know that future trend is changing quite fast. We live in an amazing time. I think no other civilization have seen or lived or experienced whatever we are having here. Maybe the only time was 10,000 years ago when human beings started farming and they domesticated animals. That was a change. Now we have a tremendous change that's taken place. With technology, civilization, humanity is changing. And almost our DNA is changing as a human being with whatever technology that will be introduced. If we look at knowledge, I heard the talk about globalization. There is a political aspect at it, but there is tremendous knowledge-sharing aspect at it. If we look at knowledge that an average person with an iPhone get every day, almost we receive a knowledge of reading 174 newspapers a day. That's tremendous. As a nation, we try to implement the good part of globalization. We are a very globalized country, maybe the most globalized country in the world. If you look at the nationality that we have, if you look at the mix, if you look at the tolerance that we experience every day, but also we teach our future generation to implement. It's always, I said, United Arab Emirates is a good example of globalization in a good way. Definitely other countries have different issues, political, social, economic issue. But whatever we've been doing is listening to people like yourself, to the globe, and we try to implement whatever we do. If we looked at artificial intelligence, it's been in discussion for the past 10 years through the forum. Today, United Arab Emirates have a minister for artificial intelligence. There is always a youth issue and how youth can be embedded in society and in government. Our Minister of Youth, she is, I think, 24 right now, or 23. And when His Highness Sheikh Mohammed announced that we'll have a fresh graduate minister from university, people thought it won't happen. Today we have some of the best experience. It doesn't matter how old are you. It's how much knowledge that you have and how mature you are when it comes to life and experience. The world is changing. That's what I'm saying here. We live in a totally new era when it comes to human civilization. And always I stated this is, when it comes to technology, this is the first second of the first hour of the first day of the first year when it comes to human advancement. We learn, we'll make mistake, we'll go back, we'll learn, but our aim is to balance between a complex future and a balanced life. We are in the business of creating a balanced life for our citizen, our residents, our visitor, and to set up a model. And that's when we stated that we are one of the world's largest lab. We go and we implement it in so many different ways. I'm not in the business of speeches, to be frank. Usually, they write my speech, I come here and I say whatever I feel like saying, and I walk away, and it does work. But are we three things that we plan to do? Usually, every year I come here, I said, this is our plan till next year, till we meet back again. And there's three initiatives that we learn from here. We'll go as a government, we'll implement it within this year. One of it is we'll have future possibility report. It will highlight the most promising emerging idea, an area with possibility of future growth. Second, we'll have future possibility index, which rank possibility by the level of its advancement. And the third thing, we'll have future possibility department, where we'll be in the business of to make possible out of the impossible. Thank you for coming. We enjoy hosting you for the past 2 days. And I'll see you on 3rd and 4th of February. When is it? January? November, sorry. We have the government forum back then. And 3rd and 4th of November 2019. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister, and also to the rest of the cabinet, including the Minister for AI, another very challenging job. My job is now really to thank the most important people here, the council members. And I would like to also show that we already have grasped a bit of the intellectual production that have been happening in the different councils. We have council managers, and I have had the chance to talk to some of them, and some of my colleagues have talked to some others. I, at the closing, tried to say a couple of words what we have grasped already, and how we will, from the World Economic Forum side, bring it forward. We will use this also as a preparation for the future. As our panelists have so vividly articulated, to avoid the mistakes of the past, we must shape a new global architecture which serves the world of the future, which spurs innovation by transforming challenges, our fears and insecurities, because they are there, into opportunities for investment and innovation. It is not the easiest task. Maybe it seems like squaring a circle, but we think it's doable. I think over the last 2 days, we have discussed the world's most pressing problems with urgency. We have debated the projects and initiatives that could fill critical gaps and provide the solutions that are needed. We have heard the Council's calls for a new narrative for global environmental governance that joins together the issues which have become too fragmented. And we also have heard the idea of doing plurilateral initiatives, and others will follow suit later. We have heard the Council's calls for a new global architecture that weaves together the need for action on climate change, oceans, biodiversity, into a new deal for nature, as much more central part of the political agenda and economy as a whole. We also have heard the calls from the Councils and your concerns over rising social polarization and the need for more local digital platforms and physical spaces where true experiments in civic education and tolerance of differences can happen. As the fourth industrial revolution accelerates, the rate of skills needed increases. We have heard your calls for new social contracts that go beyond social safety nets and target affordable and scalable access to education and mobility for work and workers. Our modern economic toolkit still knows growth as only growth. I think the panel also just showed us that we need new economic models that combine the narratives of wealth distribution. And finally, we need our governing institutions to become agile, informed by real-time data, which can maximize transparency and build legitimacy. Your work is defining the real conceptual framework which the World Economic Forum will approach also our annual meeting through different dialogues in Davos, where our annual meeting theme, as you know, have heard, maybe you know for the 30th time, but a good thing cannot be repeated too often. Our theme will be Globalization 4.0, shaping a global architecture in the age of the fourth industrial revolution. These global dialogues, ranking from economic cooperation to technology policy, will seek to spark action by policymakers. We are grateful for your engagement over the past 2 days. I would say there is more work to be done. Indeed, I would call on you to act as ambassadors to your organizations for the agenda that you contributed to setting during the course of this meeting. I truly believe that we are now at a watershed moment and that there is bold thinking, leadership. I'm just as confident that our community will deliver on the promise of Globalization 4.0. So with those thoughts, built on important input from my colleagues and based then on some of the findings in the Council's Minister, I officially closed the annual meeting of the Global Future Councils 2018, and the farewell reception immediately follows this outside here. Thank you so much for your contributions and safe travels back.